Okay, interface types. Okay, everyone, so let's begin this session by discussing and showing and explaining how to configure those interfaces. So we want to connect the firewall onto our network. So we got a couple of options that we can choose from depending on your scenario. So we're going to take a look at doing layer 2 interfaces. We're going to take a look at doing layer 3 interfaces, tap interfaces, loopback and tunnel interfaces, and finally, when we're ready to do HA pairing, meaning that we're going to have two firewalls in a cluster setup, we're going to make some high availability interfaces as well. Okay, so let's get started with layer 2 and we'll go from there. Okay, a layer 2 scenario. So say, for example, you want to have the Palo Alto enforcing traffic, but you don't necessarily want to be a routed hub. You don't want the Palo Alto firewall to become a routed hub, meaning that in a layer 3 perspective, your users will need to hop into the Palo Alto in order to get to somewhere else on the network. But you still want to enforce rules and traffic. You can do that by applying layer 2 interfaces. And the way you do that is by configuring a specific set of VLANs that you want to allow communications to and from on that particular port. And for example, you have a switch that wants to talk on another switch on the same layer 2 VLAN, then you can put a Palo Alto in between and enforce the traffic and monitor the traffic and set some policies for it. So let's go ahead and configure a layer 2 interface. Okay, once logged in onto the Palo Alto, we want to click on Network. We want to go to Interfaces, and inside the interface, we have our Ethernet interface tab. Let's go ahead and select one of the interfaces, and let's take, for example, Ethernet 1/1. Go ahead and select this interface. Once we have the interface window option, then we're going to change our interface type to be a layer 2 interface. Go ahead and select layer 2, and now we can either assign that to a specific VLAN, or we can just leave it as a layer 2 and then add sub interfaces with multiple VLANs. So in case you have a trunk that you're allowing to pass multiple VLANs, you don't necessarily need to allocate a specific interface for a specific VLAN. You can take advantage of configuring sub interfaces for it. So let's go ahead and do that example. I am going to also allocate it into a layer 2 security zone. Again, we need to create a security zone that its main purpose is just to add layer 2 interfaces, and that's very important. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to show you how to make a layer 2 security zone. Just basically click on New. Let's call it layer 2. Click OK. And now we have a security zone, which is our layer 2 in this case. Let's do the same thing for a VLAN. Let's configure a VLAN, and you can see I already got a couple of VLANs there. So let's configure VLAN 20. Okay. So I'm going to click OK. Now we have VLAN 20. And it's on the security zone layer 2. And we can enable LDP, but in this case, we're not going to do so. Just for this purpose, I'm going to show you how to tag a VLAN interface on that particular port. We'll click OK. And sure enough, once we commit the change, because obviously we need to commit the change so it becomes active, then this interface is particularly dedicated for VLAN 20. Okay, so if you want to have some interfaces, and this is what I suggest, you suggest take advantage of that trunk and configure a trunk and then create sub interfaces for each VLAN that you need to allow traffic for. So let's go ahead and make it a layer 2 without any VLANs assigned onto it, and then we'll make sub interfaces so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to go ahead and click delete. And then once I delete, then I'm going to just configure it again as a layer 2 interface. Okay, let's go ahead and select layer 2. And obviously the security zone will be on layer 2, but we're not going to add any VLANs. We're just going to click OK. And now we're going to add a sub interface. And you can see the sub interface option down below here. We'll click there. And this is where you can actually assign the specific layer 2 tag on that interface. So in this case, we're going to do 20. We'll go tag also 20, and then here we can actually assign it to the VLAN instance, which is 20, and again a layer 2. You see, now under this physical interface I have a logical sub interface doing .1q trunking. In this case I have a sub interface with .20, which is my VLAN tag. So if you can see here, I'm tagging VLAN 20, and I am actually assigning it to VLAN 20. So now I can even add a layer 3 interface inside this VLAN 20 VLAN instance. So I can go here into the VLAN, and then I can add a layer 3 interface for it. So I can actually select my VLAN 20, and then I can assign an IP if I want to. And also I can say 20, so to make everything consistent. And then we'll basically press OK, and then I'll create that VLAN interface as well. So if you want to have a layer 3 address inside that layer 2, you can also do that. But I would recommend having just a layer 3 mode and then create sub interfaces in layer 3, which you can definitely do sub interfaces for VLANs in a layer 3 interface, and we'll show you that in a bit. Okay, so back where we are, we're actually checking .20 here, and now we're going to do the same thing for 30 and 40. So we're just going to select our main physical interface, and we'll create another sub interface inside that physical one. We're going to do 30, tag 30. And we're going to assign a new VLAN instance for this. In this case, let's call it VLAN 30. We'll press OK. And then again, add it to the same security zone, layer 2. Well, with this, so if for some example you want VLAN 20 and 30 to talk to each other without having some sort of policy in between, then yes, it's fine. But I would rather have this on separate zones. The reason why this is the purpose of doing this, you want to have one particular VLAN assigned to one particular zone. So for example, if 30 is the VLAN for wireless, it will make more sense to create wireless VLAN 30 as my zone name and assign that to this particular sub interface. So that way you're actually isolating inter VLAN traffic. You're not going to allow those two VLANs to communicate with each other unless there's policy for it. We're going to press OK. And now we have 20 and 30. 20 belongs to the layer 2 security zone. That was our example. Again, you should definitely label this according to what you want, the purpose of it. So we're going to click on that, or we're going to say wired VLAN 20. And by the way, we should change this to be a layer 2. Okay, now we have a layer 2. Now we should be able to select VLAN.20 sub interface, and let's just change that to our wire VLAN 20 security zone. Now we know that 20 belongs to the wire VLAN security zone and 30 belongs to the wireless VLAN. This is an example that you can use to implement layer 2 interfaces. So once you're done, you just commit and we should be good. Just plug in a port and you're going to have trunk. Make sure that the trunk is allowing both VLANs. And yeah, you should be good to go. Once you have that, you should be able to make those security policies and enforce traffic between those two VLANs. Layer 3 interfaces, I believe this will be the most common deployment. With layer 3, you basically assign an IP address to that particular interface. Or you can also, like our previous demonstration we did layer 2 with sub interfaces, you can make it a layer 3 interface without any IP and then create sub interfaces for each particular VLAN that is passing on that trunk interface. And this is one of my favorite ways of going. So for example, you have a port channel and you have two firewalls, or you have one firewall that wants to span across two different switches. For redundancy purposes, you can build a layer 3 port channel and then create sub interfaces under that port channel. And once you have that, you can assign particular IP addresses depending on the type of networks that you're trying to communicate via the Palo Alto firewalls. Okay, so let's go ahead and configure layer 3, and we'll do a layer 3 testing end-to-end, and you'll see the results. Okay, when configuring a layer 3 interface, it's very simple. Go to Network, Interfaces, and we're going to select an interface that we're going to allocate an IP address, and then we'll test connectivity to it. Let's take a look at 1.2. So I have a switch connected to this particular interface, and we're going to configure an IP address on this interface, and then we're going to connect to that switch and see if we can test and we can have IP reachability. So let's click on the interface. Once we click on the interface, we'll configure the IP. Select the interface type. In this case, will be a layer 3. We're going to assign this, because now it's a layer 3 interface, we're going to assign this to a particular RTR or virtual router, and we're going to discuss virtual routing on another section. But every single layer 3 interface must be assigned to a specific virtual router so it can forward traffic to other interfaces. So that's how you have layer 3 connectivity between different networks. So let's create a virtual router just for this demonstration, so we're not actually using the default one. Okay, so once here, we're just going to call it router 1, and then we're going to press OK. And now we have our router 1. So we're going to say that this is our inside interface. So we're going to create a security zone, or by the way, we have one already. So we're just going to add it into the inside security zone, and this will be a layer 3 security zone, because we saw that we can create different type of security zones. In this case, it has to be a layer 3. Now we're going to configure an IP address for it. We're just going to click IPv4 or IPv6, depending on what type of network address space do you have on your environment. In this case, we're just going to configure the most common one, which is IPv4. We'll click add, and let's type a new IP address. So let's say it's 10.20.0.1, and let's make it a /24. Press OK. Advanced, we can add a management profile. So remember on our first videos, I cover management profile. In management profile, we can set this interface as our management interface by just allocating a management profile that includes SSH, HTTPS. But I just wanted to make sure that I can ping, I can reach the interface. So I'm just going to select my management profile, which is ping. Okay, so we have everything. Press OK. And now we have that layer 3 interface configured. By the way, you can allocate address objects because now we know that we can have everything in address objects. So it's better for labeling purposes or naming purposes. So let's say this is our dev inside, and then we can also type the IP address. And then this is a /24. It doesn't allow forward or backslash. I'm just having a dash here. We're going to type 10.20.01/24. And now, because we have that, then we can, instead of typing the IP on the interface, we can assign that address object as our interface address. We're just going to select the interface. Okay, we'll click IPv4. Remember that I manually typed my IP here because I want to know what is that IP for. I'd rather use the address object. So let's just delete this. We'll click add. And sure enough, I have it here. Now, on my interface table, I can definitely see the name and the purpose of that particular interface. So now we have that. We have it assigned to a router. We'll press commit, and then we'll go onto my layer 3 switch, and we'll see if we can reach that interface. Once I have that interface configured, and I was able to see that it came online, which is showing my link state to be up, let's go ahead and test. I have one core switch here, and let's go ahead and do a quick ping and see if we got a response. So I have an interface in my core switch, which is 10.20.02. And let's go ahead and do a quick ping and see if we can reach the Palo Alto firewall. And sure enough, I get an ICMP response. So let's see if I take out the management profile out of the interface and the outcome of doing that. I'm going to go back into Ethernet 1/2. Once I'm there, I'm just going to remove the management profile of ping, and we'll test again and see what will be the result. Take this out, none, OK, and then we'll press commit, and sure enough, let's go ahead and test once this is done. Yep, so I for sure am not able to ping because I just removed that management profile out of the interface. Okay, so with tunnel and loopback interfaces, we create tunnel interfaces so we can allocate a logical interface. If you have an IPsec tunnel, you're gonna have a tunnel interface where you're gonna either push traffic through, and your virtual router, you're gonna select that tunnel interface and say, hey, I know how to get to this network. It's via this interface. In this case, it will be pointing towards the tunnel interface. I can create a loopback interface that will have an IP. This will be always on. So if, for example, you want to monitor something, or you want traffic to be redirected to a loopback interface, or you have a router process ID that need to allocate to your specific routing process, this is the way to do it. You configure a loopback interface, and then you add that loopback interface onto your dynamic routing process, either is OSPF, BGP, etc. Let's go ahead and configure a tunnel and loopback interfaces. Okay, once on the Palo Alto, click on Network Interfaces, and then click the tunnel, and we're going to make a tunnel interface. And imagine if we're partnering or we're peering with company A, and then company A decided to build a tunnel between our company and them. So we're going to build a tunnel interface. In this case, we're just going to add a comment to my tunnel interface saying that it's company A. And then tunnel, we're going to say, because it's our first tunnel, we're going to just add .1 to it. Virtual router, we're going to assign it to our same router, so both my inside network and the tunnel network can communicate. Security zone, we're going to create a new zone, and then the name of this zone will be our company A tunnel. We'll press OK. And now this belongs to this security zone, so now I can have policies from my inside to this particular company A tunnel, so I can direct or enforce traffic between those two destinations. IPv4, so if you're doing an interface mode tunnel, then you configure an IP address here, but in this case, I am not going to work on IPs or tunnel configs yet. That will be a separate session. Advanced, same. If you want to assign a management profile to ping something remotely through the tunnel, you can do so. But no, I'm just going to make the interface. Okay, once I have the interface, I can then go onto the IPsec tunnel and go ahead and, once I'm creating the tunnel, I can select that tunnel interface that I already created for it. So we can right here, we can already select tunnel 1. And then once we configure everything else, this will be the allocated interface for this particular tunnel. Okay, loopback interface. Loopback. Click on interface. Loopback. We're going to add one loopback interface. In this case, let's call it loopback 1. And this will be OSPF router ID. And we're going to say it belongs to our router 1. And no security zone, because this is just a loopback interface for our routing process. We're going to click on add, and we're going to allocate an IP. In this case, I want the routing process to be 11.11.11.11.11, making something up. It's a /32 because it's a single host. And sure enough, we want to make sure that it pings. We'll press OK. Once I have that loopback interface, I can go onto the virtual router, select my router 1. You already see that I have a loopback 1 assigned to it. So now we can configure that. Okay, once here, then I can say router ID enable in OSPF, and I can type 11.11.11.11. So now if I want to know that I have reachability to my OSPF instance, router instance, which is this Palo Alto firewall, then by pinging 11.11.11.11, I will make sure that I have reachability, which in this case is an always on loopback interface in the Palo Alto firewall. Then we'll press OK, and we should be good. Okay, HA interfaces, or high availability interfaces. When you need to build a 2-firewall cluster, in this case a highly available firewall cluster, you need to allocate some HA interfaces so you can build that synchronization between the two units. There's firewall models in the Palo Alto platform that they already come with a HA interface, or multiple HA interface for this purpose. If you have a Palo Alto firewall model that doesn't come with that feature, you need to enable or change the personality of one of those interfaces to be an HA interface. And let's show you how this is done. Okay, back on our network interfaces section, click on Ethernet. And let's say we're going to make Ethernet 1/3 HA interface. We'll click the interface, and we'll change the interface type to be an HA interface. We'll press OK, and now it became an HA interface. So now we should be able to add this to our HA configuration, or a high availability configuration. So we'll click Device, High Availability, and we can just click this setup here, and we'll enable HA. We'll press OK. And in our control links, and those are your HA links, this is where we allocate a specific interface. So if your Palo Alto doesn't have already assigned HA interface, you can change personality by doing what we just did, and then assign that as your HA interface. Select here, and then we can assign Ethernet 3, which is your HA interface. If you don't make this an HA interface, you are not going to be able to see this popping as your options. You need to make it an HA, and then you configure your HA setting. Okay, and then finally, once you do everything, just press commit, and you should be good. Okay, so we just finished our interface type section video. In the next video, we're going to be looking at vWires. Thank you for watching.